Thank you for that introduction. If you recall, the last time we were together, I introduced you to try out a little more detail about the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, and that placebo is good things that can happen in regard to health based on what you think and believe and what's going on in the mind. And nocebo is deleterious things that can happen because of bad things that you think or don't understand correctly and have a negative thought, and they can adversely affect your health. On the more comprehensive nutrition we've developed over the last 36 years, New Eden, the recognition of this that I put on there is a little statement, never to be taken on an empty spirit. And what this all relates to is that more and more information is developing by scientists that our brain is a biocomputer. And the function of this biocomputer of the brain is the mind and thoughts and visions and creativity and comprehension and understanding and the derivation, understanding of facts. About 40 years ago in Scientific American, I read a letter to the editor from a medical school professor that said we ought to spend more time and money on examining the placebo effect because there are no toxicities and side effects from placebos. It is very powerful because that's the reason very expensive scientific studies are done with random assigned two populations to be compared, try to make them with the computer as two equally age, sex, degree of deviation from normal is possible, and that the patients as well as the investigators are blinded at who is getting a inactive intervention, say a placebo pill. Many think that stands for false. It's not false. It's what the body can do on its own without the test material. That he points out what links science and medicine goes to try to eliminate the power of the mind to improve health. The third thing he points out is placebos are remarkably economical, and safety, effective, and economical are things that people want. I have frequently said that people really are interested in what can this more comprehensive nutrition do for me? And for many people, that's all they want to know. That people do not want to be biochemists or geneticists or molecular biologists or physician or healthcare provider. And as we get into placebo and nocebo effect, certainly people don't want to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. However, one of the reasons I give these lectures is that if you look in the dictionary, they say that faith is belief based on a lack of proof. What I'm trying to do is to give you the science to support the function of the mind, that this is not belief without proof, but that there is independent science that has been conducted, that more comprehensive nutrition, working with the engineering and design of life that is coded in DNA and the genes or in your chromosomes that controls cellular synthesis of bioactive molecules that run the biochemistry of life. So what your mind is capable of driving your genes to do, you also need to have in your diet the dietary molecules that the cellular synthesis of the genes can work with to put together amino acids, fatty acids, carbohydrates that are either sugars or monosaccharides, vitamins, minerals, and these very unique trace phytonutrients that are in the plants. And if you're not interested in the sciences, but you're fascinated by this, I've tried to, maybe I haven't told you before, but I recommend this Secrets of Aboriginal Healing by Gary Holtz and his wife. Is a nuclear physicist that had multiple sclerosis and went to the Aboriginal outback. And lo and behold, for 30,000 years, these natives have understood, though they didn't have the terminology, that our minds control everything that goes on in our body. But there's no science in that book. However, as I said, that I had read this note more than 30 years ago in New England Journal of Medicine, that the placebo should be studied. And I'm reading this book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he refers to multiple experiments that have been done over the decades in regard to defining the placebo effect, that is the power of our mind to improve or either be deleterious to our health. And the only reason I bring this up is that to tell you the reason I'm giving these lecture series is for you to be able to put in your mind, because we're surrounded by a population that believes that if you got a problem, physical, mental, or emotional, there's a drug for it somewhere. Well, the programs are in your genes if you have the proper nutrition to make the bioactive molecules to move you to the normal zone. Because anything out of the normal zone is a deviation of health that is classified frequently as a disease or syndrome. And we don't do anything to treat, cure, or mitigate disease, syndromes, or abnormal health condition. All we do is support the normal function of the cells with more comprehensive nutrition to support the genes that have the programs to move everything to the normal zone. So with that, I want to go to the next lecture, and it will be, to my amazement, I'll have to say, I wish I was so smart that I intended on finding and seeing all the benefits more comprehensive nutrition does when it supports the genes. But this is on the benefits with people with addictions. With that, we'll go to PowerPoint. I have been amazed over the years of what can happen to improve health with more comprehensive nutrition. And I'll share with you some anecdotal experiences that awakened me and kind of shook up my, I'd say, my preconceived conceptions about addiction. The first time was back in the 1980s. A hospital up in Amarillo, Texas, had a foundation that had money and was considering contributing to the research of Carrington Laboratories to do more research on the active ingredients from the aloe plant. A secretary there had been handling communications between the company and the hospital foundation. And one day she called me and said that her brother, pardon me, had been sober for the most months of his adult life. And so, with alcoholism being such a common problem, I began to ask questions. And her brother was a English-speaking engineer, which is a really coveted person in the United States. So many of them are foreign, and English is a second language. So he had had multiple jobs, but been fired on them time and time again because of his alcoholism. And then he tried to run his own companies and went bankrupt several times. because of alcoholism, and he'd had a series of marriages and children and families, and they had broken up, and it was just a terrible history. And she was amazed that by getting him on because of some joint problems and all, the active ingredient from the aloe plant, she realized he had been sober for the longest period. And so I worked with him for several months, and it was interesting to try to figure out what in the world's going on, that this person that had a terrible alcoholism history quit drinking excessively. This was followed a number of years later by I would say, an over 40-year-old female at major meetings of the company that I was the medical director for, that marketed dietary supplements. And with several people around, she would say, I've got to get you alone. I need to talk to you. And I wasn't sure I wanted to get along with her, but this happened at several meetings. We never had a time. So one time I was in this line of telephones way down at the end of it, in a little narrow thing and all, and she appeared at one end and screamed out, I finally got you. And I kind of wilted a little because I wanted to know what's going to happen. And so she came up and she said, I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to do it with anybody else around, that I was Jimmy Hoffa's secretary. Said Jimmy Hoffa Sr., that nobody knows what happened to him. And I don't know, but she said, I started as a very young lady, and because of the people that I associated with there, I became addicted to alcohol, to heroin, to cocaine, to methamphetamines, you name it. I became addicted to it. And she kind of blushed a little and says, you cannot imagine the terrible things that I have done just to get another hit from what I've been addicted to. And said, I got to be about 40 and I realized I was slowly dying. And I didn't want to die. I wanted to be happy and live and all. And I realized that this multiple poly addiction was destroying my body and my mind. And so I went cold turkey. And she said, you cannot imagine the agony of going cold turkey after being addicted to so many substances. But she said, I virtually lived at Addiction Anonymous, very similar to AA or Alcohol Anonymous, and said, I went 7 times a day and spent most of the day there trying to stay sober. But she said, every cell in my body was screaming for the stuff all my waking hours. It was just miserable as this went on. Then she said, somebody in my life got me to take this more comprehensive nutrition. And with that, she threw her hands in the air and she says, the monkey's off my back. No longer I'm addicted. And she was just so emotional and all. And certainly that got my attention, that something very good is happening against these bad substances. Another experience was up in Canada and the northwestern United States. You have more of the Native Americans for the North American continent, not only in Canada, but in the area of the States. And at both places, there were Native American counselors that one of their biggest problems was alcoholism in the Native Americans. And both of them had found out that most times they had backache or joint pain in their ankle, their knee, or the hip, and that they could give them more of the comprehensive nutrition and it would help their pain. And they found out the more they took for the pain, the less alcohol they consumed. And in fact, they kept working with them and were able to get them back to where they could go to their job and all. And certainly this practical experience was beginning to grow, and that I was frustrated because I really didn't understand or have any idea about addiction, but it was growing on me. Well, I was asked to speak at a conference on glyconutrients in Michigan, and one of the people on the program was a Colorado internist, and his whole lecture was that the brain makes dopamine, some of the nuclei in the brain, and that it is the common reward pleasure molecule that the brain makes, that you can even inject it or anything and you'll feel pleasure, and that eating causes dopamine to be produced, and that leads to obesity. But it also, people that have a shopping passion and just can't control their desire to buy things, that dopamine is produced. It gives them pleasure. And that many habits and obsessions that are repetitive, like compulsive gambling, computer games, spending binges, alcoholism, illegal drugs, caffeine, sex, pornography, virtually any activity can produce pleasure in some people that is consuming, because there's flood in the brain of dopamine. And that is the pleasure producing molecule. And of course, the question is, really, is this more comprehensive nutrition? How can it be active in this human compulsion? What is the mechanism of action? Could there be a single molecule that brings us pleasure, and that this active allo-oligosaccharide is a molecule that counteracts dopamine or whatever it be? Well, in regard to this excessive activities, a major challenge I have found over my years in human condition is balance, finding balance in life, and attitudes and activities, how you spend your time. And you should have moderation in all things, as I've told people time and again, moderation in all things but love. Love is the only thing that we don't have too much of on this planet Earth. And I guess it's a certain amount of this love that I feel that I wish that I could help people with addiction that's coming out of these things. People are telling me the benefits of more comprehensive nutrition. Now, if you recall, that secretary from Hoffa Senior had multiple addictions, and she was very adamant that this drive for addiction was taken off her back and it no longer exists. And this was growing to say, I need to spend some time on this and figure out what's happening. And thinking about it, what I'd been learning about how cells function and how nutrition is used and how the logic is in the DNA of the chromosomes, that there is such logic and detailed constructive engineering and design that, to me, it's illogical that there could be something going on that people lose their control, and that there is such logic in growth, development, and daily function and operation of the body that it's illogical that there would be molecules that people lose all their control. And what might be the mechanism for drug addiction needs to be thought about. Well, in mental gymnastics, I had been seeing and hearing that nutrition was reducing the addiction drive. My physician wife is an addiction specialist. All her patients are addicted to either heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. they're less addicted to alcohol in her practice. So that's a more common problem in our society. Well, she uses methadone, which was developed in Germany when during World War II they could not get the opiates from poppies due to the warfare going on. And so this methadone would reduce pain, but they found out it was less addicting to the people they gave it to. And so they have been using methadone to try to get people off of their obsession with opiates. Now, in your addicted cocaine and opiate patients, there are some division of the population. They're low metabolizers, which takes a low dose of methadone if they get satiety. And my wife goes to work at about 5 o'clock in the morning because her patients, if they get the methadone, can go to work and function just like any other person. Many of them, it's very confidential. They're attorneys, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're elected officials that are able to function if they get the methadone early in the day. It's kind of like insulin for a diabetic. But there are also among this population those that are moderate metabolizers that make a little more methadone is required to get satiety. And then there are high rate metabolizers that take a high dose of the methadone to suppress the drive to get an illegal drug. And this fuzzy thinking in my mind is that this is obviously genetically driven, that you've got to have this titration with the amount of methadone, and very much like the story of the sweet peas of Father Mendel in the early history of genetic control of life, that he was able to develop different colors of peas, much like a low, medium, or high metabolizer. I received a phone call in the early 2000 from an Air Force physician who said, "I need to talk to you." Says, "I am taking care of a United States Senator's grandson that is addicted to heroin. And when I got him, he was a very rapid metabolizer. It required very high doses of methadone. And he says, I know what I'm doing. I wrote the military plan for how to handle addiction in the military services." And he said that in observing this grandson, that he went on the aloe-ace mannan-based dietary supplement for just general health reasons, because his health was not doing well for his age, and that he had observed that he went to requiring only a moderate dose of methadone, and then over time a low dose of methadone. And he says, I can predict he will have no addiction to the heroin drive, and that we need to talk about an addiction study. Well, we talked while he was in the service, and finally after he retired, trying to get something going. But the problem is you can't do any kind of studies, and they're difficult to even get permission to do studies in human beings without significant funds to pay for, particularly professionals or anyone who's going to help you do the study. And the military, when he was there, he couldn't get any funds there. And he said, now I'm in a group where I have to charge every patient I see for my time. That's what people in their physician group get for their income. And I can't see addicted patients free. And so nothing ever got done on this, but this is one of the very positive inputs from outside about the importance of it. And the name of this was Major Johnson, who's now retired. And I told you how he developed the program for alcohol abuse and his observations with the single grandson. And he felt like a lot more needed to be done. And unfortunately, nothing got done. Now, to try to get across to you the importance of what you put in your diet and its effect on your daily living, I got to know Dr. Lyndon Smith up in the northwestern United States. Whenever I did a big lecture up in that region, I'd look out there in the office in the audience, and there would be Dr. Smith there time and time again. And he noted years before that his son would wet the bed predictably on the days they got free milk, eggs, and cheese from the government surplus food for the school cafeteria. And it took some time to realize this, but when there was no government food, there was no wetting of the bed. But when they had this surplus of either milk, eggs, and cheese, he would wet the bed. And he got to thinking, diet can influence body function. And he's shared with me that you ever notice that occasionally you'll see dogs chewing on plants, particularly if they haven't been acting like they have a lot of energy, and maybe they sense their health is failing and they will chew on plants. He said, I think there's a primitive sense in the animals that there are things in the plants that they need and it will make them feel better. And I'll question that possibly in young human beings, that when we're young and innocent, that there's a ability, possibly much like these dogs, to and he says, I'll share with you why I really think this, but I think as we get to be adults, we lose this. And he had 20 vials of purified dietary supplement ingredients with a screw cap on. And these children would come to him, and he would take the lid off and have them smell it. And does it smell good? Does it smell indifferent? Nothing happens at all, or does it smell bad? And if it smelled good, he would make them a customized dietary supplement by putting and mixing in powders those vials, of which they would say smell good. And from time to time, at 6-month intervals, this would change, but the problems that the children were brought to him that no drug or anything conventional medicine had to offer had been a benefit, they improved. And so he had a practice of customized dietary supplement, and that he was seeing improvements in children's health. And people from not all over the United States, but even foreign countries came to him, and he got to be known, and he was got on television. And lo and behold, eventually someone filed against him as a pediatrician, and the state medical board took his license away from him because he wasn't using FDA-approved pharmaceuticals. And they said by not using these pharmaceuticals, he was defrauding the public, and charged him with non-scientific, non-professional practice. And I might add that we had good laughs over this when the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, known as DSHEA, was passed in 1994. I made copies of it and sent it to him FedEx and said that now it's federal law that supports what you were attacked for, particularly the statement in the preamble at the first of this act that I paraphrase says that science and medicine has been able to demonstrate that more optimal nutrition is essential for good health, to prevent disease, and to restore health. Well, you might add, what more would you want or expect from nutrition? Well, one of the nice things would be that rather than just be in the preamble, if this were in the body of the law, also over time, he would get with his 20 little bottles and his customized dietary supplements, everything that we saw with the bulk products that we were providing built around the aloe plant. And we would laugh, we would say that he hunted for the problem with a rifle, the exact ingredients that helped the child. Whereas all we did was provide a nutritional shotgun and let the child's GI tract and his genes and his metabolic activity find what it wants and use that. And it's a whole lot cheaper. And we got similar results. But point I'm making is that what is in the diet really can influence your health. Now, all of this went together until finally in April 1998, there was an annual conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico on the problem of alcoholism in the Native American reservations. And with psychiatrist Dykeman and her staff, my wife, and individuals at Carrington Laboratory, we presented this scientific poster, which attempts to show, because alcoholism is such a problem in general society as well as the Native American Indians. We'll go to this first chart, that the alcohol cravings as they went on it, you can notice they would go down by particularly the fifth week, and it continued down. And the counselors with these alcoholics that we had seen in the past, that their depression, their energy levels, their anger and their temperature, and their outlook on life would increase, whereas those negative things would decrease significantly, as you see the bar graphs on mood states, that the cognition, it went from 15 to 30%, depression dropped from 22 to 8, anger and temper, 44 on the scale, dropped to 17, and that the outlook improved. This was trying to show them that the more comprehensive nutrition was influencing the alcoholic. Now, this is a proposed theory, which is opposed to theorem. Theorem is the way something was yesterday, is today, it will be tomorrow. But theory can change, and it's a hypothesis that you feel like it's worthy of being tested. And in the light thing, we have a neuron in the nervous system of blood circulating around it. And on this neuron, there are different, is in the center, receptor sites, which you see A, B, C, D. They have a configuration biochemically on the membrane of this neuron. And the proposal is that this configuration A, B, C, D over to the left, that it's a site on the neuron for a micronutrient that's supposed to go in there, and that that's what it is. However, that the alcohol metabolite is partially fit into that neuronal membrane site, like A, B, and D, but it doesn't have C. It doesn't provide to the genes the molecule that's required for cellular synthesis to make normal biochemical activity in the brain. However, if you provide the micronutrient that would be available in our dietary supplement, it knocks off it because it fits the receptor better. And by knocking off the metabolite that the demand for in this case, alcohol is reduced because the requirement that the nerve system was wanting is provided by the micronutrient. And if this is not how this helps the addictive impulse, I don't know what to offer other than the addictive metabolite partially fits into the receptor site, but provides no cellular synthesis role, whereas the actual micronutrient fits it better and kicks off the metabolite. And incidentally, the genes are such that if you are not getting the proper nutrient, it will make more metabolic sites and more alcohol metabolite will add to it, and addiction increases. And that's where we get into the methadone patients that require high dose or rapid metabolizers, and then moderate as you add the grandson, as we were adding the micronutrients to his diet, it started decreasing the genes making receptor sites for the heroin. Well, this is the proposed mechanism of why micronutrients reduce addiction. Now, another big addiction is food. And this really struck me heavy as I started hearing from physicians and physicians' wives and nurses and people in the medical field, which I felt like had a more of a basis to observe what was happening in their body than, say, the general people that would say, I've lost 25 or 50 or 75 pounds without trying. But these people really had major benefit. In fact, as we had a type 2 diabetic in Minnesota that lost 150 pounds without trying, and that really hit me because type 2 diabetics are the most resistive to reducing weight. Now, why might food addiction be reduced? And I hope you will follow me with this because it's a little involved, but I studied what is going on. And DNA is inside the center of the cell, and it's like books in the library that are so important you can't check them out. So that it's the DNA stays in the nucleus. However, just like in the library, you can take a photocopy machine and make copies of these basic texts that they won't let you take out, and you can take it to your wherever you want it to work with it. Well, that's what RNA is. RNA is a copy made from DNA that is also nucleic acid, where the desoxyribose sugar is replaced by ribose sugar. And this RNA can leave the nucleus where the DNA is, and there are two types of RNA. One of the RNAs, and I've showed you in previous lectures that there's a little assembly line in every cell, and there's 3 steps, major steps in the cellular synthesis. And one of the RNA is called informational RNA that tells the organelles how to put the nutrients together in cellular synthesis to make the bioactive molecule. But the other RNA is called transport RNA, and that's why they put a little T in front of the R. And the transport RNA goes to an organ inside the nucleus called the nucleolus, and it's processed. And amazingly, this transport RNA will go into the fluid of the cell and of the fluid around the cell and interstitial space and look for and attach to amino acids, fatty acids, carbohydrate molecules, units called monosaccharides, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, and bring them into the assembly line when they're needed to make the bioactive molecules. There is a audit step in RNA that first inside the cell, an audit is made. Is the RNA made correctly from the DNA? And then once the RNA has been processed, it is also audited again to make sure it's properly made. And I want to hit you with more important, the constructive, intricate logic of this process of what's going on in the cell to create life from molecules that are on the composition of matter chart that have no properties of life, but the cells under the control of the DNA can take these lifeless molecules and put them together, and behold, you have it. Well, let's say that the RNA that's supposed to go out and find various nutrients and bring them to the assembly line cannot find the nutrient molecule that's needed. Well, there's evidence that a message is sent to the brain, basically, eat till you find it. And that is a drive for food ingestion that is sent and drives hunger. And we basically have an addiction to food. And oftentimes there are excess calories ingested, and that is stored in fat cells, but the intricate little phytonutrients to finish off the bioactive compounds, lo and behold, we put those in the dietary supplement that the RNA can find it, and that message that's sent to the brain, eat till you find it, is cut off. And that's why these people that by having dietary supplements time and again tell me, I can't understand it. I have been hungry all my life. I kept chocolates or gummy bears or various gumdrops on my desk, in my purse, in my pocket, in my car, in my office. And now they're gathering dust or melting because I don't have this drive in the brain to continue to eat. I have satiety, and I can control my eating habits. And so this is proposed that knowing what the actual DNA metabolism is, molecular biology, that this is one of the major sources of compulsive addiction, food addiction, and why more comprehensive nutrition reduces the need. What you provide for to the messenger RNA, the nutrients that were missing from the diet by adding this supplement, and the message to the brain, eat till you find it, is cut off, and the people can control their appetite. And this, I think, is the reason we had repeatedly people say they had failed at all types of diets all their life, and all of a sudden they've been able to reduce their obesity factor, and they're guided by reduced appetite. Now, I've presented alcohol and excessive food intake as the highest addiction problems in our society, and that's why I focused on them. And apparently the body requires certain nutrients to be provided, and what I've provided to you just, I think, cries out to somebody to evaluate it and be able to get the funds to try to find out and prove not just what I have given you as a theory of what I have observed. And addiction is very frequent challenge in our society. And with that, that's the end of the lecture.